Alright, so this is the diversification of class Reptilia, which are also known as reptiles. There are a total of 4 orders with over 10,700 species, according to World Atlas. The 4 orders are as follows: Tetrapod, Sphenodontida, Squamata, and Crocodilia, and we'll be getting into those later in the presentation. Here we have a timeline of the diversification. As you can see, the first branching is early in the Carboniferous, and as time moves on into the Permian, we have further branching, which indicates further diversification. Some of the main factors leading to diversification are as follows. Firstly, the evolution of the amniotic egg allowed reptiles to move away from waterside habitats and colonize the dry regions. So the amniotic egg, it has fluid-filled sacs. So when you think about when life was purely aquatic, like fish eggs, they don't have a shell. They have a thin membrane that's around the organism growing inside, and in order to maintain their moisture, they rely on the water that's all around them. So a huge issue with moving from water to land is where the growing organism, the embryo, where it's going to get that necessary fluid. And the evolution of the amniotic egg comes with its own little fluid-filled sac around the embryo. And so because of this, because it already has its own personal supply of that little fluid, this means that they no longer needed to lay their eggs in the water, and that was huge in moving from water onto land. Next, they have scaly skin, which is full of keratin and waxy lipids, and this immensely helps to reduce water loss. This is a key in survival when transitioning onto land. So another big thing, once again, is maintaining the fluid, maintaining those moisture levels. If you compare it to amphibians, amphibians have very, very thin and sensitive skin. They need to stay near the water to maintain and retain all of the moisture in their body because they don't have any sort of protective outer layer to keep it in. That's what reptiles and their scaly skin full of those waxy lipids and that keratin, that's what did it for them, and that allowed them to dominate and diversify over time. And lastly, a main point to make is that it wasn't until the evolution of herbivory that new reptile groups appeared. So obviously, no matter how equipped you are for a new environment, you can't exactly dominate if there's nothing to eat there. So in the Carboniferous, this is when plant life started to become much more abundant, and that's when those reptiles were able to dominate. So some characteristics that are unique to reptiles, once again, is their skin. It's dry and rough, and it also has scales with a further use for armor when they creep and burrow under the ground. They are ectothermic as well, which means cold-blooded, and the benefit of cold blood means that you can survive on less food. So at night, cold-blooded animals, they let their body cool off. So this reduces the amount of food needed overall to keep the body running because you don't need to heat it up. They just allow it to cool off. They have a body divided into a head, neck, trunk, and a tail. They also have well-developed ears, with the exception of the snake. Reptiles are almost all predators, so the development of ears as a sense helps them immensely. And they also have 2 pairs of pentadactyl limbs, which are 5-digit, penta 5, dactyl digit, with claws. Once again, they are predators, so the claws are obviously a means of a weapon, but also it has to do a lot with their locomotion. Like lizards climb up and down things, so having claws to grip, that's another reason for those. They also have hearts with 3 chambers. The exception is a crocodile, which does have 4, but overall, most reptiles have a 3-chambered heart. And they also have 12 pairs of cranial nerves in their nervous system. Once again, they're predators. They can benefit from the development of all the senses, and they use lungs as a system of respiration. That isn't unique to reptiles, but it is important to note because obviously no longer in water, no more use for gills. So they do use lungs as their system of respiration, and their genitals are in the form of a cloaca. A cloaca, it's kind of like an all-in-one kind of a hole. It's where these reptiles excrete waste, so fecal matter and urine, but it's also where the reproductive parts are in reptiles. So in females, this is where the eggs are, and in males, this is where the sperm is ejaculated from. And lastly, reptiles breed via internal fertilization. And internal fertilization is another way of protecting those fertilized eggs from dehydration on the land. And also, because it's internal, it's isolated within the female's body, so that limits predation on the young.
Hello everyone, so I'm going to be explaining a certain type of trait that developed in lizards to help them survive on land. So early terrestrial reptiles developed a trait that would help them adapt in many ways on land. This trait they developed is called dequado autotomy, which allows the reptile to drop its tail when threatened or when attacked by a predator to make a run for it. And scientists believe this trait evolved from the Lepidosauria branch of reptilian evolution. Scientists are still confused on how it is only in lizards and not in other vertebrates like turtles or crocodiles. This is a case where a certain type of reptile diversified from other types of reptiles. And so moving on and continuing forward, this trait that they developed gave them a lot of success on surviving on land. This allowed them to go out and hunt small prey, and when they feel threatened or when they attack or when they are attacked, they can drop their tail and maneuver and try to get out of there. This made many of them survive attacks from predators, obviously. The diversification that happened here is really unique and perfect for these reptiles, and it is nice that the tail continues to grow back even when it was ripped off. And I remember when I was a little kid, my brother showed me that the tail can rip off and it could squirm on its own too and everything. So I've seen that firsthand, and it evolved all the way to lizards today, which I think is pretty cool.
Hi, so I'll be talking about Testudinata, more specifically Chelonia. The family, genera, and species the one we're focusing about is Anapsida, and it's divided into categories. We're not going to talk about the one that doesn't have information because I'm focusing more about Chelonia. And they're classified according to the method of retracting the head in the shell. So basically, we're talking about turtles that, they have the shell and they retract their head in the shell. And obviously, turtles, tortoises, and terrapins belong to this group. Some characteristics about this species is that they're the smallest kind of testudines, and those include bog turtles, flattened musk turtle, and speckled cape tortoise. They're vertebrates, but however, their hip and shoulder bones are inside the rib cage because the ribs are not attached to their shell. They have no teeth, but they do have hard, flat surface on their jaws that allows them to grip and bite plants and or animals. And their jaws, their mouth have they're pointed, so that allows them for to chop to have a grip and chop their plants or the animals they're eating. More characteristics about chelonia is that they lay eggs and they have a relatively long lifespan. They also mate repeatedly. They come in many sizes. I found out that the largest sea turtle weighs up to 1,191 pounds. They have a bony upper and lower shells that cover their entire body. I mean, not their legs and their head, just their. Some have pointy upper jaws, horny beaks, like I mentioned before. That's how they like get a good grip of their food. They also have long necks, as we can see here. And yeah, that's basically it for this species.
All right, so now we're going to go over the order Sphenodontia. So a little background on this specific order. This order originated around the Mesozoic era, but currently only has 2 species that are still alive to this day from this specific order, which are the Sphenodontia punctatus and a much rare species called the Sphenodontia guentheri. Both of these are tuataras, by the way. Their tuataras are found on islands off the coast of New Zealand, approximately somewhere around like 30 islands offshore of New Zealand. And as you can see, they come in a variety of colors, like grays, olives, and red. Red. So they have really long lifespans. Alongside tortoises, they have some of the largest longest lifespans among reptiles. They live at least 60 plus years. Many live to like 100 plus years. And also they're one of the few reptiles that are able to thrive on colder temperatures. As you can see, their preferred body temperature ranges anywhere from 60 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, but they can also be active in temperatures as low as 45 degrees. As for their reproduction, they take a while to sexually mature, somewhere around like 13 to 15 years, but as late as 20 years. And males do not have external sex organs, so they reproduce through this method called the cloacal kiss. So one of the more recognizable traits from the tuatara, it's a parietal eye. Scientists don't really know what this third eye is really for, but amongst the many theories is that it helps them recognize the day and night patterns, and this will be useful to them in the sense that it would help younger tuataras survive because of the fact that they tend to be more active during the day, while adults tend to be active during the night, and adults are cannibalistic. So, it would definitely help them survive. And another trait is that they can also shut off their tails when threatened, and they can which they can later on regenerate. And as you can see from this image, like with turtles, they don't really have like a really developed sense of hearing. Like they don't, their sense of hearing is rather primitive. So they don't really have a developed eardrum or like a tympanus, but they can still hear. However, they can still detect. They're still sensitive to some frequencies. Yes.
All right, so this is the order Crocodilia. Order Crocodilia has 23 total species. They are semi-aquatic. They come up onto land to bask, but they do like to congregate in the water for a significant part of their time. Furthermore, they get most of their food from the aquatic habitat that they reside in. They have a complete secondary palate separating external and internal nares. A secondary palate is a little slab of bone that actually separates the nasal passages with the mouth, and this allows them to breathe even though their mouth is full because it's separated. Two different airways. They are predaceous, as seen by the fact that they have forward-facing eyes, they have those big claws, they also have those big teeth. Crocodiles are predators. They have a gizzard. So a gizzard is kind of a muscular stomach, and what it does is it grinds up foods that are really difficult to digest. And lastly, they breed via internal fertilization. Um, the main benefit of this is the sense that because the embryo is isolated within the female crocodile, um, this limits predation on those eggs.
And for crocodilia origins, crocodilia are generally huge, ruthless, and semi-aquatic reptiles known as crocodilians. They were previously seen about 95 million years back in the late Cretaceous time from the Cenomanian stage. They are the earliest living families, and they're closest to birds, as they are the two species or gatherings that are main known overcomers of the Archoasauria. There are about 23 species of crocodilians, and there's also 3 families. Crocodiles, they have about 13 species. Alligators have about 2 species, and caimans 6 species, and gharials, which I think you're pronouncing that right, 2 species, and they all live in about the tropics to the subtropical countries, and they usually reside about 4,000 kilometers away from the equator or around the equator. So that's it. Thank you.
And moving on to the squamata, obviously from the pictures, they are a different type of vertebrates in this category. Some of them have all 4 limbs and some of them are snakes, obviously. And so I'll be talking about the characteristics for these. And some of them have horny scales or shields. Some of them have movable jawbone. Some of them are scaled. Some shed their skin into patches and others shed into like one whole piece. Some have jointed skulls and jaws, which make it flexible and strong. And they are able to open their mouth wide to consume large prey. And they also have a very strong bite grip. And that will be it.
Squamata origins. Squamata have some of the oldest fossils dating between the Middle Jurassic period, about 168 million years ago. The Essid phylum contains about 4,161 species, representing all the currently recognized families and subfamilies. There are more than 94,000 species as of December 2012. There are no signs of the rate slowing down, with a record of 168 new species in 2012. Squamates are found in every continent except Antarctica and the Indian Pacific Oceans. The origin of squamates is controversial for about 3 big reasons. The first one, a fossil gap of about 70 million years between the oldest known fossils and their estimated origins. And for second, there's been a limited sampling of squamates in the reptile phylum. And for 3, debates between morphological and molecular hypotheses regarding the origin of crown squamates.